people muddy the water so you don't know how deep it is. And then they make it so that you need them to get through, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of people out there muddying the water for a lot of like really good people, you know, making it seem more complicated than it needs to be.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Flip the Switch. I'm Phil Sundahl from Batch Service, and today our guest is the one and only Jamil Damji. Jamil is a widely successful real estate wholesaler with over 20 years of industry experience. He's also the co-founder of Keegley, a nationally franchised real estate wholesaling outlet operating in over 180 markets and counting. Jamil is committed to sharing his expertise on his popular YouTube channel and in his Astro Flipping group, which is a community of real estate wholesalers with more than 4,000 active members now. Is that right?
Yeah, it's 6.
6,000. You just said that. My apologies.
All good.
Welcome to the show, Jamil.
Hi.
So, Flip the Switch. We learn about stories, people, the moments that changed their careers, their personal lives. And so let's start from the beginning with you, Jamil. Tell me how you got into real estate.
You know, it's an interesting story, right? I didn't wake up one day and be like, I love real estate. It was really not how it happened, right? I initially was supposed to be a physician. My parents were like, listen, you got 2 choices in life. You're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a garbage collector. Which one are you going to do? But I didn't get into medical school. And so I'm in this like really interesting situation in life now where I'm in an unknown world now where I'm not going to be a doctor anymore. So now what? I end up getting a phone call from a friend who knew somebody running a media company. I come to this company. They're like, we're struggling in sales. I said, okay, well, let me try. So I, get the phone book and I start calling industries at the letter A. And I'm, a whole week, I'm killing it. I sell more websites in a week than they did in an entire quarter. That's how good I was at those sales. And, I knew I had leverage. So I went to them and I asked, give me 51% of the company because I'm obviously going to be the person that's going to save this situation. And I need to have a stake in this. Otherwise, it's not worth my time because I can't do this commission thing. It's just not going to work for me. And they were like, okay, well, yeah, we're either going to close the doors or you're going to help save us. So we'll do it. And so I'm super happy about that. We start going. I'm rocking and rolling in the sales. So I do really well, for a few years. And then the market crash happened and, the story kind of took a turn.
So after that happened, were you pretty confident this is something that you could rinse and repeat and do again? Or
yeah, I actually did rinse and repeat and do it over and over and over again. So like I did that first deal. It worked, as easily as the attorney had said. Like the buyer really wanted to buy it. The seller really wanted to sell it. There was no hiccups through the process. A few weeks after I delivered the contracts to the attorney, he calls me up and says, I have a check for you. And I go pick up a $47,000 in change cashier's check. And it was a game changer for me. But here's the beautiful thing is as soon as I did that one deal, I started banking up other opportunities. I started building a pipeline for myself. And back then, the way I would do it is I would go to all the rental websites and I would call all the houses that were fit the description that could potentially be redevelopment plays. And I would just call them and I'd ask if they would want to sell instead of renting. Yeah. And I got steady supplies of homes that way. And then back then, people would advertise rentals in the newspaper, in the classified section of the newspaper. So every morning I'd go get myself the newspaper. I'd go to the classified section. I'd look at all the houses that were for sale or for rent. And I would see if there were opportunities in the classifieds. Like I immediately knew that this was a thing. And I started really doing well. So, a few months after kind of creating a process for myself, now I'm off to the races. I'm doing deal after deal after deal. Eventually, I graduate from single family to apartment buildings.
We all know you're really passionate about coaching, real estate education today. You've created a lot of successful students, multiplied wealth that way. But, a lot of investors would have just kept their head down and kept growing their business for themselves personally. At
Right.
what point did the flip switch for you where you're like, hey, I want to help other people do this?
It was really Brent Daniels who inspired me in the beginning to become more vocal. Prior to becoming social media known, I was very unknown, right? Like I liked being in the shadows. I was so nervous just because I had lost all that money. I wanted to be very private and I was staying very private. But my success was starting to scream, right? They were hearing my name. Keegley became a very big brand because I had done a really good job of creating relationships and continuity for people to rely on. And Keegley starts humming, right? Like it's going. And I start to realize I'm needed less and less and less and less and less and less because the company is doing what it's supposed to do, which is run itself. And so you get to this point where you're like, okay, now what do I do with myself? Brent, he invites me onto his podcast. So I go onto Brent's podcast and like 5,000 people view it. My phone starts blowing up. People are like, hey, dude, teach me. Or, hey, bro, can you help me sell this deal? And so like it helps spike more volume. We start doing more wholesale deals, and like I can see there's a positive effect to it, right? So then I think if I get public and I talk more about what we do, it's going to benefit Keegley, but then I can also help people. I can show people what this is about. And if I can do it, then that person can do it. And because at that time, when you looked at the coaching space, it was just full of like very unsavory people, like people who were charging $100,000. There'd be no support. They would charge you $100,000 to introduce you to a few hard money lenders. Essentially, like that's what it was, right? They're like, we can help you get financing. We know the guys, but you can't get to them without us. You Google hard money lender your city, and you're going to find hard money lenders. You don't need to pay $100,000 to anybody to get those connections.
That's awesome. Do you ever sit back and just kind of like awe at the fact that you guys have sort of transformed how real estate acquisitions happens? I mean, this hasn't been around to this scale in the, since the last 5 years or so.
Yeah. I think one of the symptoms of being an entrepreneur is this incessant like obsession with moving the goalpost and continuing to grow and being dissatisfied with where you are. As tempting as it is to look back and say, good job, I think we as entrepreneurs, we don't do that enough. And because we don't do that enough, there's this like constant need to do more. Yeah. And today I have to be honest, right? Because I've had some personal side effects of that mentality. Yeah. A 10-year marriage is about to end. But when I look back at it now, I think, man, I could have spent more time with my family. I could have been more involved in but this is the symptoms of entrepreneurship. Like you kind of put your head down and you don't pay attention to what's happening around you. And then you get to a destination and you look and like half the people that you started with are with you, or maybe none of them even. And you're like, oh man, that sucks.
Let's talk about the start of the journey for investors. You've taught thousands of people how to be investors, how to wholesale. Most of the people that are going to be watching this are going to be new investors or maybe looking for their first coach. From all the people that you worked with, what would you say is the most common mistake you see new investors make that they should be thinking about?
Well, I think the most common would be that this idea that you have to know it all perfectly before you take your first step or like take action. I think that's really a cop-out for a lot of people. Like, it's uncomfortable trying something new. It's uncomfortable to suck at something. That's just reality. And so when you have this idea that, okay, no, I'm not going to make that first phone call. I'm not going to pull that first list. I'm not going to try to get my first property under contract because I still don't know this, and I still don't know this, and I still don't know that, and I still don't know that. Well, you'll never know it all. There's always something to learn in real estate. There's always another place to go. There's always a new modality or a new type of property or a new kind of thing that you can do. You don't have to know it all. But if you create that barrier for yourself, you'll never start. I think the second thing that people do is because there's so many options on what to do, they get confused, right? And, Pei said something the other day that I think was really profound. He says, people muddy the water so you don't know how deep it is. And then they make it so that you need them to get through, right? And I think there's a lot of people out there muddying the water for a lot of like really good people, making it seem more complicated than it needs to be, making it harder than it needs to be, and confusing you to the point where you're like, well, I guess I might as well buy this, or I might as well buy that, or I might as well buy this. And then, you're thousands of dollars in and you've not even made a phone call yet. Like that's a problem, right? So, the shiny object syndrome, that to me is probably the second most disastrous thing that somebody can let themselves succumb to when they're first getting started. I think you got to get in, you got to pick a direction, and you do really well in that direction before you start looking for other things. And if you can be myopic, if you can put the blinders on and just say, no, wholesaling is what it is. I understand it. I know how to comp. I know how to find buyers. I know how to talk to motivated sellers or real estate agents or whatever it is that I need to do to get a deal. And I'm just going to do this for 6 months. At the end of 6 months, take a look at what happens, and you're going to be wildly successful.
So, a timely question for you. Obviously, the housing market is different than it was during the pandemic or 3-5 years ago. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. A lot of people asking, and we get this question too, is it a good time to become a real estate investor? Is it a good time to invest in real estate?
Well, I don't think there's ever a good or a bad time to get started, right? I think the time to start is now regardless, okay? But every market provides its own opportunities and its own excuses, right? So right now the market has had its, we've had high rates. We have fewer houses on inventory because of the lock-in effect. People not wanting to sell their house because they got a 2, 3, 4% mortgage on it. So inventory is tight, rates are high, there's fewer buyers at the table, and that's creating its own ecosystem. But look at that current ecosystem and find the opportunity in it. So look at the current situation and find how you can profit off of it now, right? And that's the game. That's how you thrive in an up market. That's how you thrive in a flat market. That's how you thrive in a down market. Whatever it is, you look at it, you assess the variables, and then you find the opportunity based on the ecosystem that you're in right now.
Geographically, what are interesting places to you right now? What are ones that you're trying to avoid? Where do you see opportunity?
Yeah, great question. So I believe that there is opportunity wherever there is population. So I just like to stick to metro areas. I like to look at parts of the country that have net positive migration, right? So are people moving there or not? Okay, if they're moving there, why? Is there industry, jobs? Like, what is it that's bringing people there, right? We saw that COVID had a redistribution of the population in the United States. There's net migration. It changed the politics of states, right? Like, you had so many people from California moving to Arizona that we actually went from a red to a blue state. That's a big thing when you're talking about Arizona, because Arizona is the gun-toting, cigarette smoking. We are NRA supporting Republican state, and then a year later it's not. Right? So it's like, okay, well, that's a huge shift. So being informed on migration patterns, I think it's really important. I think really any major metro where you have a population over 500,000 that you can see there's a net positive migration in that region, I think it's a great place to work. So you don't have to be somebody who's like, I live in this part of the South. Okay, well, what's the population like? Is there investor activity out there? Yes or no? Okay. Are you seeing that investor activity? Cool. Then start there. The places I'd stay away from are those rural markets. So I stay out of rural areas. I'm personally not doing anything in the commercial space right now. I still think there's a lot of vulnerability in the commercial real estate market. I think that we haven't seen the fallout of all of the bridge loans that aren't going to be able to be refinanced here in the next little while for a lot of multifamily as well. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to go pick up multifamily right now. It doesn't make sense for me to go into the commercial space right now. I'm still very heavily focused on single family, and I believe that I'm just going to continue staying in that lane for quite some time because, at the end of the day, single family is always going to be how we live here in the United States. It's going to overwhelmingly be how we live. And so it's important that you choose like a type of property or a type of real estate class that you know very well, that you can value very easily, and that you have relationships built in both from the broker standpoint and the buyer standpoint so that you can easily plug in no matter what time you're doing deals.
As we wrap up, Jamil, one last kind of two-part question for you. What are some of those personality traits that make a successful real estate investor? And part two to that question is, what's one thing that investors can start doing tomorrow to improve their business?
So first, characteristics that I think are indicative of success. First, be coachable, right? There's nothing and there's no reason to seek help if when help comes, you don't listen to it. It is frustrating, first and foremost, for the person who's trying to help you. Second, if you continue to fight against that help, and if you're like, no, well, I think I know it better, then why are you here? Yeah. Why are you asking for assistance? If what you've been doing isn't working, then you need to give up the notion that you might know better, right? And maybe you're going to have to take some education and some counsel from somebody to do better. So I think being coachable is really important. I think that if you are a consistent person, that is going to win every day over motivation. You have to get so obsessed with being consistent that if you don't show up for yourself on a given day, that you break to a degree. You've got to be consistent, because consistency and discipline will win over motivation every single time. Yeah. So be coachable, be consistent. I think, lastly, self-awareness, just radical honesty with your place in life, with your current mindset, with your current level of development, with your current actual finances. Real self-awareness is such a lacking quality in our society, because social media pushes you to become inauthentic, right? Because they want to give you a glimpse into their life, but they don't want you to judge them for what it really is. So they give you a glimpse of a fairy tale or a version of their life that they wish was. And so now you're watching people's social media just to see that, wow, this person looks successful and happy. Meanwhile, the car is rented, none of that was real. And this person, after they make that post, feels like a complete dirtbag because it's not real, right? And so you really have to be self-aware about who you are and what drives you, so that when you are in a situation and in a position to strike, that you know your actual blind spots. Because you go into battle and you don't know where you're weak, that's where you're going to get killed. That's where you'll fold, because you didn't admit to yourself there was a weakness there. But if you are self-aware enough to know where you're weak, you can strengthen those parts, either through discipline and strengthening yourself, or bringing in people that can fill in that gap of strength that you may have, or a vulnerability or a weakness that you may have in your business or whatever that is. You install somebody there with characteristics that will strengthen you up there, and now you're a stronger individual because you've got the appropriate support. But you've got to be self-aware enough to know where you're weak in order for you to fix that.
So last question, Jamil, what's one thing viewers can start doing tomorrow to improve their business?
I think you need to make a decision. Make a decision that you are binding yourself to. Like, form a contract with yourself that you will not breach. And make that decision to say to yourself that I am going to disrupt the pattern that I've been living in, because nothing will change until I change. Nothing will be different until I'm different. So when you make that decision, I think you set into effect a domino effect of on an energetic level, on a soul level, on a personal level. You've committed that you are looking for and seeking change. You make that decision, guess what happens? The first step on what to do illuminates itself for you. It always does. The beautiful thing about this life we live is that none of us know the path, but some of us just start walking, right? And then because we started walking, the next step illuminated, and then we continued walking, and the next step illuminated, and then the next step illuminated, and then you're going to say, wait, Jamil, that step had a landmine in it. Yeah, but I needed that landmine in order to get to the next step. So what do you think? Do you think that the game of life isn't going to be full of snakes and ladders? Of course it is. And I'm going to go 10 steps forward, and I'm going to go 3 steps back, and I'm going to go 5 steps forward, and I'm going to go 9 steps back. But at the end of the game, I'll have made it. And there's going to be times where I'm winning, and there's going to be times where I'm taking an L, and there's going to be all of these things. There's no perfect record. There is no perfect record in life. You are going to get beat up. You are going to lose. But you have to be okay with that. Otherwise, if you are unable to deal with loss, if you are unable to deal with the not having a win every day, then if that's not okay for you, then honestly, just stay at your 9 to 5. Just stay comfortable. You'll be happier. If you choose comfort over growth, then choose comfort and do it wholeheartedly, and stop resenting it, and stop blaming your wife, and stop blaming your husband, and stop blaming the market, and stop blaming everything. Go to your effing job and enjoy it. 9 to 5. Clock in, clock out, come home, enjoy your family. Do that. Do that to its fullest and enjoy yourself. But you made that choice, and live with it and be happy about it. But if that is not going to suffice for you, if comfort is not what you're choosing, if you choose growth, if you choose expansion, if you choose to create, then make that choice. Make that decision in your mind and look for that first step, because that first little block is going to illuminate, and away you go.
That's great advice. Jamil, really appreciate your time today, and thanks for sharing some of your flip the switch moments. For those listening who are interested in maybe being part of your community or some of your education, where's the best place to find you?
You can check out my YouTube channel. I think, just coming in and joining Astro Flipping may not be the right move. I think come learn from me. Come see if I resonate with you. Understand if, my personality, the way that I teach, my style, if that's something that resonates with you. And if it does, then by all means, go.astroflipping.com and book a call with people on my team. Happy to have you be a part of the community. I dedicate my life to that community. My goodness, I am on coaching calls in that community all the time. I spend hours and 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 hours being there for them. Yeah. And that gives me purpose. Yeah. It's what I do. And so I'd love for you to be a part of that if it is something that you have a desire to do. If financial freedom and success is not yours at the moment, but you know that it could be, I might be the guy to help you get there. And if I'm not, good luck to you. And if I am, I'll see you then.
Thank you again, Jamil. And thanks for joining this episode of Flip the Switch. Have a good one, everyone.